Hello, everyone. Uh, my name is Dawnie Walton. I am the author of The Final Revival of Opal and Nev, and I am so excited to be here this afternoon on behalf of Barnes& Noble to chat with my debut sister, Zakiya Dalila Harris. Of course, the author of the smash sensation, The Other Black Girl, which I'm sure we are, if we've not already devoured it, we are in the process of devouring it. The Other Black Girl, of course, is the June selection of the Barnes& Noble Book Club. It is an instant New York Times bestseller. It is the Good Morning America pick for June. It's being adapted into a Hulu series, co-written by Zakiya and Rashida Jones, who is amazing. Zakiya, thank you so much for being here.
Hi, thank you so much, Dawnie, for that introduction. And hello, everyone. Full disclaimer, I am out of town in a place with not great Wi-Fi. I'm on vacation, so please bear with me. But I'm so happy to be here. Author of The Other Black Girl, which was Barnes & Noble's June book club pick. Thank you so much also to Dawnie. And of course, Barnes & Noble. I grew up going to my North Haven Barnes & Noble in Connecticut. So this is an honor. And thank you all for tuning in.
It's so good to see you. And I'm so glad that you have a chance to be on vacation, because I know what a whirlwind these few weeks have probably been. It's been such a ride for you. And, I didn't give too many biographical details when I was introducing you, because I think that'll come up naturally as we talk about the book, because you've said that you and Nella have quite a bit in common. And I'm wondering if you can talk about your background in publishing and some of the experiences that led you to write this novel.
Yes, definitely. It has been a whirlwind and a half, as I'm sure you know. And I also want to add how much I loved The Final Revival of Opal and Nev really quickly. I'm going to keep saying it. I feel like there's so much overlap too, and common themes between our books. One of my favorite books of the year. So thank you for your book. But yeah, so I, like Nella, I grew up in a mostly white neighborhood in Connecticut. Most of my friends were white when I was a young person, so that of course influenced my own personal journey as a Black girl and then Black woman, which we'll get into in a little bit. But I also worked in publishing, which is the big thing in this book. Like Nella, I was an editorial assistant. Wondering, how long it would take for me to climb that ladder. And I loved a lot of things about publishing. I loved editing. I loved getting to work with authors. I loved getting to work with editors. But of course, I was one of very few Black women in publishing. And it wasn't as bad as Nella's situation. I wasn't the only one, but I was the only Black woman, full-time Black woman in editorial. So what did that mean? That meant a lot of things, but it meant having discussions about books and often feeling like, I'm the only one. I should be the one ushering other Black authors in, which is an important responsibility, but also it's a lot to carry. And I think it's something that a lot of Black people, especially Black women who've been in these spaces as the only one, feel. And so I really wanted to look at that responsibility and what happens when it's really great and you're really leaning into it, but also what happens when you kind of just want to be.
Yeah. And I have a great question to follow up on that. But before I do, I want to remind everyone in the audience watching that you can put your questions for Zakiya into the chat. I have so many for her, but I know you have some good ones too, and we'll get to them near the end of the conversation. So Zakiya, one of the things that I really admired about this book was that it explores so many different facets of being that only one in a predominantly white space. You have two opposing poles, right? So on one end, you have Hazel May and Diana. And then at the other pole, you have Kendra Ray and Shani, who are sort of burn it all down. But what it really is exploring is sort of that nebulous middle part where, and Nella sort of is existing in that middle place of sometimes paranoia, sometimes anxiety,
Yes.
and it made for such an unpredictable ride. Even at the moments where I was fully in Nella's point of view, I had no idea what was going to happen with her, which pole she'd be more attracted to. Was it always your intention to sort of kind of explore that middle place?
Yes, definitely. I think that's so beautifully put. The polls are something that I have been really curious about. As I mentioned earlier, alluded to my journey as a Black woman, trying to find what worked for me as a younger person. I was very privileged. I never had to confront racism or confront even microaggressions necessarily as a young person. That in the moment I thought, I mean, looking back, of course, I'm like, oh yeah, no, totally. Like that time I played a slave in a play in like the fifth grade. That was weird. But yeah, so just like exploring all the different ways we can be. Everyone has their own kind of politics. Everyone has their own line. And I was just really interested in that and the ways in which, we feel like we have to sometimes be a certain way. And even Nella has prejudices toward Hazel about how she thinks Hazel should be. She thinks Hazel should would also be dating a white person like she is because they're the same kind of Black. And like, what does that even mean? Right. Like all of those kind of ways in which we are put into these boxes, but we are also putting ourselves into these boxes. And I also think just with, of course, the generational shifts of what's happening and what's in vogue or what's actually working. I think those conversations, like I've had those with my parents, with my grandparents about, things that my grandfather couldn't say or couldn't do that I can say now. We have platforms. Things are a little bit better and a lot better depending on what you're looking at. But also things haven't changed that much,
Yeah. And I think it occurs to me that this is a book about strategy, really. It's a book about like the different ways that we sort of navigate these spaces and we sort of square our ambition with who we are as Black people and what we want to project out into the world. And I thought it was so thoroughly explored. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
I also want to talk about the craft of the book because it's very complex the way that you structured this novel. We have a timeline that is a present day. We have the 80s timeline, which I was so intrigued by. And I want to talk about Burning Heart in a bit.
Yes.
But was that structure, I'm just curious to know as a writer, and apologies for the very geeky craft question, but
I love it.
How did you approach those timelines? And in what order did you write the book? Did you write the 80 sections all together and then the present day, or did you write it in the order that it appears?
I love that question. I love talking craft. So thank you for asking. So when I first wrote this book, it was all through Nella's point of view. That third person close, seeing the story happen through her eyes was really the first engine that I had. And it wasn't until after I finished the draft and I was like, something's missing. And what I felt was missing, I mean, in Kendra Ray and in Diana, we see them both in that first draft I mentioned, but I wanted them to live on the page because I felt like Nella's romanticizing of their time at Wagner Books. Like, I think a big part of me knew that wasn't actually how it was. And I kind of seeded those bits in. So after writing the Nella part, I started writing these other scenes in which we are getting to hear from the other women, because I felt like it was important to hear their version of things and hear their stories and hear their motivations. Because again, like the generational kind of shifts in the ways in which we often look to the past to move forward. Like those are things that I've always been interested in myself as a young Black woman. And so it was really fun. I also just love the 80s. So yeah. I wasn't alive.
Yeah.
Disclaimer. Wasn't alive then. Wish I was, but I was not.
And there was so much seminal Black literature, especially by Black women, that was happening in the 80s. And I loved Burning Heart as an idea. I wanted to know more about it. Can you talk about, for those who may not have reached that part in the book, can you talk about what Burning Heart is and maybe what book was Burning Heart for you? Because Burning Heart in the novel is what sort of inspires Nella to get into publishing. She's very passionate about it. And I think we all have those works that are very close to our hearts.
Yeah. I mean, Burning Heart for me, we talked a little bit about polls earlier. I got really into Huey Newton's memoir. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking out on, not A Choice of Weapons. I'm blanking out on the name of it, but Revolutionary Suicide, of course. Mm-hmm. How can you forget that title? And reading about how he became radicalized. And I was reading this around the time of Eric Garner, Philando Castile. And so for me, I was just thinking about the ways in which I, again, lived this very privileged life and then moved to New York and had my own kind of racial awakening and started to really realize, like at 22 or 21, like I am a Black woman. Like no matter how I speak, people just see that, right? And it's up to them to decide. I mean, it's not up to them, but they can really decide what they do with that information. And it's crazy, I know, 21, but my college life was pretty sheltered, and the world felt very different, I guess 7 years ago. And so I was really interested in that. And so Evie, the character in Burning Heart, was very much also kind of me. I mean, I guess you can say everybody in this book is me in some way. Spoiler alert. But so I was really interested in that. And then, of course, for me, Toni Morrison working in book publishing, I knew I worked at Penguin Random House. And of course, I knew that she had also worked there years and years before. And so that was one thing that I thought about a lot, just seeing her name everywhere. She was also a Knopf author, and that's where I worked. And so that was fuel. But I think, I mean, for me, my Burning Heart, I guess... I think for me, what really changed my world as a reader was Americana by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. Like that book blew up my world in a lot of ways. But I didn't read that until a little later. I would say my love of reading really came as a kid, though, with Goosebumps and just like a lot of scary stuff as I got older. Stephen King, but of course also Toni Morrison's Sula. And Nella Larson's passing. So I guess I have a few books that really motivated me.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned those influences because I feel like they do come together, sort of the horror and the Black literary tradition in this one book. Had you always intended the book to be a thriller? Is that how you thought of it when you were writing it?
I thought of it as a thriller in the sense of like, I really enjoy consuming those stories. Like I'm a big Dateline, true crime, like no matter what. I mean, I mentioned I'm on vacation and I'm like all the different ways, like I could get snatched, like all of those like possible what ifs are things. I mean, it's not funny, but I'm always constantly thinking about those things. And so with this book, I have this idea of these two Black women, of course, working in a white space. And one of them is off. There's something off about her. And I don't think in the moment I realized like this is going to be this genre book. I just kind of took that idea and ran with it. And then, of course, after I finished a few drafts, like talking to my wonderful agent and my wonderful editor at Atria, that was when we're like, okay, this is like, we need to do this thriller thing, like commit. And it was so much fun. I mean, I really enjoyed consuming it. And I think, a big part of me is a big Jordan Peele fan, a big Twilight Zone fan. I just think there's so much fun you can have, and also seriousness you can do with these kind of these melding of genres. So that it was kind of I tripped into it.
I do. I really do feel like a Twilight Zone feel to it, because although, in big chunks of the novel we're in Nella's point of view, and I didn't always trust her point of view, if I'm being honest. Sometimes I was like, yeah, girl, you're being a little paranoid. Like, Hazel's cool. Like,
Yes. Well, that's what I wanted. Cause the amount of times I'm like, oh, was that like, did they say that funny, or was that just me? Like, was that a low-key racist thing, or is that just me? Like, all of those things, but then also just the everything is, of course, it's intersectional, everything combines, but even the less racial things of like, did my boss talk to me in that weird way because I'm like not working hard enough, or is that just me? Like those kind of things, like those social anxieties can be so horrifying and terrifying. So I'm glad to hear that. That's what I wanted. That gaslighting.
Oh, good. Yeah, it worked. We have a question from the audience that actually segues really well into what I wanted to ask next. Stacey Holmes asked, and this is a little tricky because we know there's some people who are still reading and we don't want to spoil anything, but can you explain your intentions regarding the ending without giving it much away?
Yes, thank you, Stacey, for that question. Without giving anything away, I should say I love endings that are like question marks rather than periods. The example I always think of for me, which I reference in the book at least once, is The Blob, the sci-fi horror movie, where they think they have gotten rid of the blob. Everything seems like it's going to go back to normal. And we see the blob getting dropped into Antarctica, and it's like the end. And then it's a question mark. The words turn to a question mark. And I just love that, because I think for me, like, part of what's beautiful about art is that it's open to interpretation. And I really wanted the reader to interpret this ending in their own way. I think there are a lot of different ways it could keep going after the ending, and I have fun talking to people about that part. So I really wanted it to be this kind of like interactive kind of ending, but also I wanted the reader to really think about why it ended the way it did, and if it could have ended differently. Like, could we have, trying to tiptoe around the spoilers, could things have happened differently? Could characters have done something different to keep this from happening? And it's I'm talking about the major characters, of course, Nella and the Black women in the book, but also just like the Wagner workplace too. Like, how could this have been different? And I think that I wanted to make sure that like no one's off the hook at the end of this book. Yeah. You mentioned how much we trust Nella. I think that, again, we're all so complicated. We all have our own kind of lines. We draw lines in different places in the sand. And I really wanted to have that kind of ending that you will not forget. And maybe, again, makes you throw the book across the wall, makes you want to call your friend. It's funny, my dad kind of hates the ending because I am Nella. Every time he talks about the character, he's like, that point when you're in the bathroom. I'm like, no. But I think that's hard too. I think that's a really hard thing for readers to swallow. But I think that, again, without giving spoilers away, I really wanted to hit home just how hard it is, and to be carrying all of these things around as a young Black person, as a young Black woman working in this kind of workplace, just how much we go through. So that's my political.
That was great. Answer. Great job. Yeah, that was good. Because you have so much in common with Nella, I'm trying to figure out how to word this question. You and I both debuted this year, and it is an exhilarating process. It also feels incredibly vulnerable. And because your experience is so close, your background is so close to Nella's, what has that been like for you to, I mean, of course I know you're probably overjoyed that this beautiful book is being so widely read, but I do kind of want to like ask, how you're doing with it. How vulnerable does it feel to kind of have your psyche spread out around the world?
Yes, Dawnie. Oh my God. I don't think I've really gotten that question. So thank you. I mean, I will say I'm now seeing a therapist. It took me long enough, but cannot recommend it enough. If you can, go do it. It's so necessary because it's been a lot. I think I've always been like a very private person too, like not a big social media person, like not used to talking about all of these things in this way. I will say that I was a little bit prepared by my MFA because I did my MFA in nonfiction writing at the New School. And I wrote, my thesis was very much, I mean, parts of it are in this book in a sense of like, I wrote personal essays about my hair journey, like my big chop journey. I wrote,
We'll talk about that in a second.
Yes. So I won't say too much more about that, but like I had that experience of talking to other readers who didn't know me as well about myself. And so I do think that helped, but I think, I mean, saving pieces of myself for me is something that I've really had to be more proactive about doing. And, but the thing is that this book, I have been so open about my experience and how much it is in this book. And I'm hoping that this will, no matter how much I'm sometimes like, do I have to go down this road again? It's like, I do hope this helps. I do hope this helps other Black women, other Black writers, other young people who are dealing with, all of the things Nella is dealing with, or just like trying to navigate how complicated our world is. That's just my hope, but it is hard. A lot of self-care happening. That's why I'm in an Airbnb room right
now. So Marcia Mims Word asked, can you explain the intro of the hair products? Because hair does play such a big role in this book, from the strong smell of the cocoa butter and the formula and all of that. And then, I was watching an interview with you recently and someone said it well, there's a lot of attention paid to everyone's hair.
Yes.
And having been through the big chop experience and the exhilaration of that and the emotion that goes into that, let's just talk about the hair for a bit.
Yeah, definitely. I love this question. So hair for me has been, for most of my early life, it was one of those things that, like, for me, tamping out my natural hair was the thing. And I mean, at the time, I didn't call it tamping out because I just felt like, I mean, the time was different. Again, I'm acting like I'm like very old. But like, I feel like in 2002, which is when I started relaxing my hair, I turned 10. That was when I was allowed to do it. According to my mom, she wanted me to wait. That time felt like just all of my white friends had straight hair, ponytails. I really wanted ponytails. That was the specific thing I wanted. I wanted to swim in the pool with my friends, and I wanted to, do the thing of like tossing the hair over the shoulder. And I thought that relaxers would be like a little more like manageable, but relaxers really hurt. Like, oh my God, they really hurt. But I really wanted to have them. And so as I got a little older though, I relaxed my hair for a while. As I got older, I realized I had to pay for them. They were so expensive. I'll skip through all that part, but like, I basically ended up doing the big chop during that racial awakening I mentioned. After watching this documentary by Stanley Nelson, Black Panthers, Vanguard of the Revolution, and Kathleen Cleaver is talking about why they wear their hair natural. And I just remember sitting in this theater with mostly Black people in it and being like, why have I been doing this to my hair, the relaxing, for so long? And after that, I mean, it was a series of things, but after that, I got it all cut off at this Dominican barbershop in Brooklyn. And it was the most freeing thing. And I say all of this because it's not the case for every Black woman, but I do feel like for me, my relationship with my hair has been tied to my own identity and my own relationship with my Blackness. And the second I cut my hair off, I felt so free. Yeah. And I also just love the conversations about natural hair. And I had a Black group of girlfriends at UNC Chapel Hill, where I went to school, who had started, I got to hear those conversations with them. But as a young person, I didn't. And so with Nella, who also didn't have those conversations as a young person, she's so excited to see that Hazel has natural hair too, working in this corporate space, because a lot of Nella's kind of, again, her prejudices are that, like, you know, most Black women who probably work in these spaces have relaxed hair or have straight hair, because that's what we're told we have to do. So she feels this kinship to Hazel. And I knew that would be the thing that really pulls them together. And it's, you know, it's funny because I also think we spend so much time. I mean, not everybody, I think different hair, of course, requires different time, but like, my hands are in my hair all the time. We're so closely tied to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Everyone, please keep the questions coming in the chat. They're fantastic so far, and I'm excited to ask more of them. What have been some of, I have been so delighted to hear from readers who love this book, and there have been certain comments that really stick with me and are beautiful surprises. So I'm curious, like, what have been some of your favorite moments of feedback about the book, or just anyone you've heard from that has been especially meaningful to you?
Yeah, well, I'll have to say same about your book, Dawnie, because I have the comments and the love for Opal it makes me so happy. There's just something, I think, for me, and I wonder if it's the same for you too. I imagine it might be, but like the pouring of support from Black women specifically, who are like, this is my story, or this is the story that I've been wanting to read, and needing to read, because we don't see ourselves reflected in this kind of story, especially with the other Black girl, this genre element. And so having that kind of affirmation, because that's really what I wanted when I started writing. I mean, I was writing, of course, for myself and for all the insecurities that I have and have had and will always have, probably. But again, shout out to therapy. And I think, though, that like when I was writing, I was like, I hope this resonates with people, and to hear that it does in some capacity. Has been really rewarding, especially the conversations like that I don't explain about like hair and other Black references and things like that. But also from white readers, like the comments about looking things up. Like, I didn't know what this was, and I looked it up, and it was great. It was like, thank you. Like that's also amazing, because you just never know. You never know when you pour yourself out on the page, whether or not people will get what you're trying to do. And it's just a good feeling. You know exactly what I mean. I do.
And, I didn't work in book publishing, but I worked in magazine publishing, and I had some kind of idea of how the sausage gets made. And sometimes it can be hard to turn off that part of your brain that is worried about audience and worried about appeal.
Totally.
Is that difficult for you as well too?
Yes. I mean, all the time. I mentioned I did my MFA, but even still, it's different having your work out in the world and having, of course, people, not everyone's going to connect with it. And that's just how it goes. That's the beauty, I think, of literature too, and of art. But yeah, even beforehand, I mean, I knew how hard it was to get a book published. I knew how hard it was to even get your foot through the door for anybody. And then pile, of course, on top of that, Black writers. And so, there are times where I remember working in publishing, and we'd get proposals that were so good. We would get books that were well written, but for whatever reason, we didn't buy them. Maybe there was a book that we already had that was like it, or maybe this or that. And so there's so many factors. And when I was like working on the book, I really had to ignore that part completely and just focus on how fun it was to write it. And that was hard. Like, I'm not going to say it was easy. It definitely had days where I was like, what is the point? But it was worth it.
But did your background in some way prepare you for the kind of the process of putting a book out into the world?
Definitely. I mean, I'd seen the proposal and like the early stages of submitting to editors and all that kind of thing. The agent process was pretty daunting, though. Getting an agent was really daunting because they get so much in, and I just hadn't seen that side of it before. But I definitely think, just knowing the steps, because I've had so many people say to me, how do you do this? Like, and it's not easy. It's not clear. I was very fortunate to,
I don't know. It's something we're not really taught in our faith programs.
Nope.
And so you go out into this process and it's like, you just talk with your writer friends. Like, is this normal?
Yeah.
Is this, it's just like a word of mouth thing. So it's very kind of bizarre and opaque.
Totally. And it's also one of those things where you're right. You really have to be connected. You really have to find a community. And I mean, now I think with the pandemic, in some ways it's been kind of a positive because I've found myself being more involved in an online book community than I might have been if, before the pandemic. And just, I'm hoping that more young people, and again, especially young Black writers will, be able to link up more and because I do think that we gotta help each other out. It's really hard out there.
Yeah. Well, one of the more exciting moments of the publishing journey is when you get cover designs. Can we talk for a second about this gorgeous cover? And then also someone had a question about the title, Linda George. Love the twist in the story regarding the title. Was that the title all along, or was it something that evolved? So everything on here.
I love that question. Thank you, Linda. So the title actually comes from me and one of my good friends, whom Malika is loosely based upon. Malika is an amalgamation of people, but one of my good friends from my MFA program and I would often go to parties and we'd be the only Black girl there except for one other Black girl. And so we would often be like, oh, there's the OBG, there's the other Black girl. I wonder what she's like. And like, we would talk to her, of course, but like, it was one of our inside jokes of like, oh, like we're like, and it was never, of course, in the way that it appears in the book. But I think for me, like, I have always kind of been that person. And I think a lot of Black people do this, and minorities do this in terms of like, when you're the only one in a space, you find, or you're one of the only ones, you find the other one out of safety. I think it goes back to safety, but also out of just community and like, okay, is it cool here? Like, are we going to be good here? That kind of thing. And so the other blank, I think is really kind of my way of showing that kind of truism, I guess. And yeah, the cover. So I'm still so obsessed with it, Dawnie. I can't, every time I look at it, I'm just like, how did this happen? But I know how it happened and I'm going to tell you how it happened. So let's see, last summer, my publisher, of course, we're still in the early stages of editing and things like that. I knew that when the cover conversations happened, I knew that I wanted the artist to be a Black artist. I wanted the book also to, of course, show that this is a Blackity Black book. Of course, there's the title, but why not add another element? And so my agent and I made a list of a few different Black artists who we had found online and on Instagram. And one of them was Temi Coker. And my publisher, Atria, wonderfully, they reached out to him, and they had actually seen that for Juneteenth on Twitter last year, he made this banner, this beautiful artwork called My Black is Beautiful. Go check it out. Go check out his work. I have to highly recommend it. It's gorgeous, and it's a little different from this cover image. She's facing a different way. There's more color, different colors happening, but I just loved how striking. I mean, the profile view kind of reminds me a little bit of like Nefertiti, like we always see often the profile of Nefertiti. It's regal. The Afro pick, I have an Afro pick fist like this. My dad had one as well. I hadn't talked to Atria about this yet. So the fact that this artwork had that, I was like, yes, serendipitous. But it was one example of just how wonderful and how fortunate I am to have had Atria really just like every step of the way, taking my hopes for this book and really making sure it was exactly what I wanted it to be. And I'm so thankful to Temi and so thankful to Jimmy Acobelli, who designed this cover at Atria. I just really, really wanted this. And it just makes me like even teary just thinking about it.
And it really stands out. I mean, I was at the airport recently at JFK in New York and just saw it everywhere. And it was like tear inside. We have a few questions about your writing process. So, those of you who've seen the segment on GMA learned that Zakiya wrote a lot of this book by hand. Joanna is asking, she says that's very impressive. Could you tell us about your writing process? And congratulations on such an amazing book.
Thank you so much, Jonna. So I'm also left-handed. I feel like that's important to say. I don't know. But I love to write by hand. It's how I wrote when I was a kid, of just like filling up notebooks. And then I would type them after once I learned how to type. And for me, it really releases me from, now distractions, because everything's a distraction for me. But it also makes me feel freer to mess up. Like I love crossing out words as I go along. I love drawing. Like if I showed you one of my notebooks, it's just like good luck. But like for me, I can see it. And then when I transcribe it, I edit it as I transcribe. And so that's kind of that was my process. And part of it too was I was working a few different part-time jobs. Like I worked in publishing. I quit to finish this book. And after that, I worked in a cupcake shop for a little bit. I taught creative writing to children at Raytopia Lab, which is a nonprofit in New York. And so I was on the train a lot. I was on the go a lot. And I didn't know sometimes where I would be. So I would often write on my in my notepad or like sometimes on a Google Doc if I like really didn't have space to like spread out on the train. So it just for me is such a freeing process and allows me to really be less hard on myself.
That's great. We all could use a little of that. And then Barbara Winston is asking, how long did it take from writing to publication?
Oh, yeah. So let's see. This book came out of me unnaturally fast. Like I had spent a couple years working on a book previous to this one, and I just couldn't get it to go. But this one came out in about 9 months. I call it my baby, the only baby I have right now. And from there, it took me about 3 months. Sorry, I'm doing the math as I go. So total, it took March, May, June. I should know this answer. I don't think it took about 17 months.
It's a long process.
Wait, hold on. January, I'm so sorry. 2019 to, yeah. It was mostly that the editing process took the longest because there was just a lot of parts.
Yeah. And so congratulations on the Hulu series. That's hugely exciting. And you're kind of entering a whole other industry that has its own kind of dramas going on, Hollywood.
Yes.
What's that process been like and collaborating with Rashida?
It's been amazing. I mean, oof, there's so much to learn. There's so much to learn. And I've been watching a lot of TV. I've been reading some scripts. I've been talking to Rashida a lot, who has been such a wonderful mentor to me, just like navigating this like very strange process. Because when I started writing, I hadn't thought this far. Like I was in the moment, trying to stay in the moment, and was like, if it gets published, like cool. At least I tried this, and so to have it go this far has been really, really exciting. Just to learn that new craft and just really get in the characters' heads in a different way. It's been really fun.
Yeah.
But it's hard.
Yeah, I can imagine because it's not like it's a one-to-one translation. It's
Right.
a totally different form that you're writing for. And I imagine it also, is like letting go of some things.
Yes, definitely letting go of some things, but mostly it's been adding, interestingly enough.
Yeah.
Because the characters that we don't, I mean, Malika, Owen, a lot of characters at Wagner Books, I of course couldn't fit all of them into the book because it's just too much. But with the show, it's like, oh, we can get more into this backstory, and like I'm also just excited about the music. The music is my favorite part of it.
Awesome. And there is a great playlist for this book on Spotify as well, right? Is that on Spotify?
Yes. I believe if you just look up The Other Black Girl, Atria Books has posted a playlist.
That's awesome. Now I'm going to ask you a question that I know like it's come up a time or two in this chat. It's a question that I hate to get, honestly, because it feels like a little bit of pressure, but are you working on a new book?
I knew it.
Sorry, apologies in advance.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Well, it's funny. Before we got on this call, I was jotting some notes down in my book about possible new ideas. But I'm really, there's publishing a book is a lot, and it's my first book. So, who knows? But I think after, a few months of just thinking about everything, I'm going to think more about that. But right now I'm just like leaning into the TV show and leaning into this moment and just trying to soak it all in, because the being present can be really hard. And so I'm really excited to go into that world again when I'm like feeling fertile, I guess, fertile with ideas.
Yeah. So now, please. Please ask in this moment. It's so incredible. It's so exciting for you. Thank you so much for being here. We are unfortunately out of time. That 45 minutes is really fast.
So fast.
I know, but thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Thank you for your wonderful questions. Zakiya, congratulations to you. I look forward to watching this novel continue to soar.
Thank you so much. Congratulations to you too, Dawnie. Everybody go get Opal and Nev and go listen to the audiobook as well. I can't wait to listen to the audio. So excited. And thank you again to Barnes & Noble for picking The Other Black Girl for June. It's such an honor. I really appreciate it. And thank you for tuning in, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of the day.
Now back to your vacation. Bye-bye.
Bye.